Yesterday was not guaranteed, tomorrow is not owed, today is all we have. The Stoics believed this deeply. They lived each day as if it were the final one granted to them, not in reckless indulgence, but in focused attention. They understood that to postpone effort, to delay character, to wait for perfect conditions, was to gamble with something they did not control: time. The modern world is full of distraction, delay, and false urgency. People hurry through days without awareness, chasing things without reflection, avoiding the work that builds peace. Stoicism calls for a different approach. It reminds us that each day is a chance to live with principle, to practice virtue, and to meet life directly. In this video, we will examine how Stoic wisdom teaches us to act, think, and live in alignment with this truth. Each day is a finite and sacred opportunity. There are no guarantees of another. The only rational choice is to use the one we have. Chapter 1. The Shortness of Life. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." This sentence carries a sharp and undeniable truth. It calls attention to the difference between how long we live and how well we use the life we are given. The Stoics did not dwell on fantasy or wishful thinking. They looked directly at how people spent their days and asked whether those choices reflected awareness of life's limits. People often assume they have time for everything. They treat days as if they will never run out. They tell themselves there is always time to start later. They believe that progress, self-examination, and the development of inner strength can be paused without loss. This attitude becomes a quiet habit. That habit shapes how they move through life. When there is no urgency, direction fades. Days blur together. Choices are made by impulse rather than intention. The result is not always chaos, but drift, movement without course. The Stoics noticed this common tendency. They did not criticize. They reflected the pattern back to those who lived it, hoping they would see the danger for themselves. When a day is spent without clear intention, its hours slip past unnoticed. The mind becomes caught in minor tasks that do not build character. Conversations remain on the surface. Reactions replace reflection. Entertainment fills the gaps left by boredom or fear of solitude. Distraction multiplies, and with it, time is lost. This is not because the day is too short, but because it has been used without purpose. Years disappear while a person remains convinced that they still have time. The Stoics considered this one of the most preventable forms of harm, the waste of one's own life through inattentive living. When time is used with awareness, it creates clarity. Awareness allows you to see what is essential and what is secondary. It allows you to act with discipline rather than impulse. It builds a mind that resists panic and urgency because it is aligned. A person who knows their time is limited speaks with meaning. They walk away from shallow conflict. They say what needs to be said. They begin what needs to be started. Their urgency does not come from fear. It comes from understanding the cost of delay. Even a brief moment, used deliberately, can carry weight. A single focused conversation can strengthen a relationship. A small act of courage can reshape character. A purposeful life does not need long preparation. It begins by deciding how to use the next hour. It continues by practicing small acts of discipline throughout the day. It is shaped by repeated decisions to stay aligned with what matters. The Stoics approached life one moment at a time. They did not wait to be granted more years. They made use of the one in front of them. Each morning, they began again. Each evening, they examined whether they had lived in accordance with their principles. This rhythm of daily focus allowed them to stay grounded in what they could control. Memento Mori is the reminder of death. It is a Stoic practice used to remove false certainty. It is not designed to shock or depress. It is meant to make decisions clear. It asks a simple question: If this were your last day, what would you do differently? This reflection helps remove distractions. It helps sort what is worth your attention and what is not. When the possibility of death is acknowledged, habits change. Conversations become more honest. Actions become more thoughtful. Time becomes more valuable. Mortality is not used as a tool for fear. It is used as a tool for perspective. To reclaim time, you must know where it is being lost. Time is not only taken by large commitments, it is also lost in recurring patterns that carry no benefit. Resentment that lingers for years consumes energy that could be used for growth. Mental comparisons distract the mind from self-improvement. Replaying old mistakes reinforces identities that no longer serve you. These mental patterns seem small, but they accumulate. They take time that can never be recovered. The Stoics practiced interrupting these patterns. They asked, "Is this useful? Does this thought help me live better today?" If the answer was no, they let it go. Stimulation without purpose weakens attention. Entertainment without reflection fills the mind with noise. Routines that do not support values slowly remove direction. When you become aware of where your time and energy are being pulled, you begin to create structure. That structure allows your mind to focus. That focus allows your actions to support your principles. This is how time is reclaimed, not by adding hours, but by removing waste. Living on purpose means treating time as a resource that must be spent with care. It means facing the day with a clear understanding of what matters. It means using thought to guide action, rather than reacting to whatever comes next. When you live this way, your hours begin to reflect your values. Each part of the day becomes an expression of the life you have chosen to build. The Stoics believed this was available to everyone. They did not believe you needed more time. They believed you needed to be more present within the time you already have. There is enough time in a single day to speak honestly, act with integrity, and reflect with clarity. There is enough time to begin the practice of becoming the person you want to be. This does not require dramatic change. It requires consistent action. The Stoics trusted that small, intentional efforts compounded into strength. A strong character is not built by accident. It is shaped each day by the way you speak, think, and choose. Life is already unfolding. You do not need to wait to start. You do not need to delay your values until the timing feels perfect. The Stoic approach is simple. Use what you have. Begin with where you are. The mind becomes stronger when it is directed. The spirit becomes calmer when it is disciplined. The path forward begins the moment you decide to walk it. You do not need more time. You need to use the time you have with complete attention. That is the Stoic answer to the shortness of life. Chapter 2. Daily Awareness of Mortality. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." This is a Stoic exercise in clarity. It brings the reality of death into present thought, not as a symbol, but as a fact. It asks the mind to stop drifting into imagined futures and to focus entirely on the life that is unfolding today. This perspective is not about fear, it is about direction. It shifts the focus from distant goals and imagined timelines to the only thing a person ever has, this moment. The Stoics used death as a reminder that every hour counts. They viewed each interaction, each action, and each choice as a chance to act with character. When you understand that this may be your final chance to speak honestly, to show gratitude, or to live your values, you act with greater attention. The modern world often encourages a long-term mindset. People are told to plan, to delay, to wait for the perfect season. They are trained to believe that more time is always available. This belief weakens urgency. It creates routines that delay growth. The Stoics saw the cost of this mindset. They brought the mind back to the present. Their focus was never to discourage planning, but to challenge the assumption that time is infinite. Daily awareness of mortality narrows the gap between values and behavior. It removes the temptation to compromise on what matters. If this were your last hour, your decisions would become clear. The need to impress would disappear. The desire to win arguments would dissolve. You would speak truthfully. You would act with care. You would let go of resentment. This exercise in awareness brings out what is already inside you. It uncovers what is most honest. Mortality brings proportion to events. A minor setback loses power when you see how small it is in the face of death. A missed opportunity no longer defines you. A difficult day becomes manageable. The shortness of life forces you to place events into proper scale. It allows you to step back from emotion and ask what really matters right now. This is how the Stoics built calm. They trained the mind to stay in alignment with death as a reference point. Remembering death gives each action weight. It turns simple moments into meaningful ones. The final conversation with a loved one is never recognized until it is over. Practicing awareness prevents this blindness. It sharpens how you treat others. It corrects selfish impulses. It turns distractions into choices. If today is your last, then this moment is sacred. This changes how you respond to people, how you use your voice, and how you spend your time. The Stoic practice of remembering death was not random. It was daily. It was deliberate. It was used in the morning to prepare the mind. It was used in the evening to evaluate whether the day was used well. It created a structure of attention that did not depend on external reminders. Death was not used to intimidate the spirit. It was used to train it. This awareness helps remove hesitation. Many people delay speaking the truth. They delay making needed changes. They delay stepping into responsibility. They wait for confidence or clarity. But when death is placed beside delay, the illusion of safety disappears. You stop waiting for ideal circumstances. You begin acting with what you have. The person you want to become is built through action, not intention. This practice also creates depth in simple acts. A walk becomes more than a routine. A meal becomes more than habit. A single conversation becomes a moment of connection. Mortality reminds you that repetition is not guaranteed. It forces the mind to stop rushing through life. When you walk with this awareness, your posture changes. You move slower, but with more control. You listen more, speak less, and act deliberately. Many people search for purpose in long missions, but the Stoics believed that purpose could be practiced in each moment. If you treat each day as your last, your attention sharpens, your excuses drop, your voice becomes honest, your actions carry weight. There is no need for extreme behavior. There is only a need for alignment between who you are and how you live. This is the value of remembering death. It forces alignment. It gives no room for drifting. It teaches the mind to be present. It brings decisions into focus. It separates the necessary from the trivial. It turns a vague life into a directed one. The practice is simple. In the morning, ask, if this were my last day, how would I live it? Throughout the day, pause and ask, is this action worthy of my final hour? In the evening, ask, did I use this day well? These questions create structure. They make presence a habit. They make character a priority. Death is not a distant event. It is a certainty. The Stoics did not speculate about when. They used the fact of death to strengthen how they live today. Each moment is a gift that cannot be reclaimed. Each word you speak might be your last. Each decision you make carries the weight of finality. And when you live with that awareness, your life becomes honest. That honesty is where strength begins. The mind becomes sharper, the soul becomes calmer, the day becomes meaningful, and you live as the Stoics taught, awake, focused, and grateful. Chapter 3. Delayed effort is wasted life. The Stoics saw procrastination as a rejection of responsibility. When a person delays what is important, they weaken the will and multiply regret. Effort postponed is potential wasted. Waiting for motivation is unreliable. Waiting for comfort is dangerous. Clarity begins with action. Growth begins with discipline. Epictetus taught that progress requires practice. A person becomes just by doing just acts. They become wise by making reasoned choices. They become strong by enduring difficulty with purpose. There is no substitute. Delaying effort often comes from the belief that there will be a better time. That belief is untested and often false. The future is imagined. The present is real. And what is done today is the only foundation for tomorrow. You build a strong life through repeated application, one decision at a time. If you wait, you give your life to chance. If you act, you give your life to structure. Each time you say, "I'll do it later," you are subtracting from your one life. Each time you begin now, you are honoring your capacity. The Stoics trained themselves to begin. That was their secret. Chapter 4. Resisting Distraction. Modern life is designed to capture and divide your attention. Devices, apps, advertisements, and constant alerts compete for focus. Information is pushed at you from all directions. Each input interrupts the flow of thought. Each interruption weakens your ability to remain with a task or stay grounded in reflection. The Stoics recognized that attention is a form of self-direction. What the mind holds on to determines how life is lived. If your attention is scattered, your efforts will also be scattered. The Stoics trained themselves to protect attention. They viewed the mind as a tool that required care and discipline. They were aware that focus is limited, and once it is consumed by trivial matters, it becomes unavailable for important decisions. To them, attention was not just a mental process. It was the pathway through which the soul expressed itself. A person's life reflects the quality of their focus. When your day is filled with noise, your mind becomes reactive. If most of your thoughts are shaped by outside influences, you begin to lose control of your direction. You chase after what appears urgent. You react to what appears offensive. You allow the opinions of others to form your priorities. The Stoics worked to prevent this by creating inner boundaries. They chose what to give their attention to, and they defended that choice. Distraction is not always dramatic. It often appears as routine. Checking messages constantly, switching between tasks, seeking immediate pleasure through passive consumption. These behaviors seem small, but they train the mind to avoid depth. They reinforce a shallow mode of operation. Once this pattern becomes normal, sustained effort becomes difficult. Clarity weakens. Decision-making becomes reactive. The Stoics treated distraction as something that erodes the mind gradually. Their solution was structure. They began the day with reflection. They asked questions that guided their choices. What should I focus on today? What matters within my control? What behavior supports my principles? These questions grounded their actions. In the evening, they reviewed the day honestly. They looked at what they allowed into their mind. They examined whether they had lived with discipline or been led by impulse. This daily cycle of preparation and review allowed them to resist the pull of distraction. Distraction cannot be removed entirely. The world does not pause, but it can be managed. It can be understood. The Stoics created routines that prioritized clarity. They avoided environments that encouraged shallow thinking. They limited exposure to noise and confusion. They shaped their lives around their values and then reinforced those values with habits. These habits preserved focus. They built stability. To reclaim attention, begin by identifying what disrupts it. Track what pulls your focus without adding value. Reduce unnecessary decisions. Design your environment to support thought instead of disrupting it. Create specific times for reflection and protect those windows from interruption. These actions support mental discipline. They do not remove distraction completely, but they make it manageable. Attention is an investment. What you focus on shapes how you feel, how you speak, and what you build. A mind directed toward principle becomes more steady. A mind filled with noise becomes less reliable. The Stoics saw this clearly. They knew that without attention, there is no progress. A person cannot improve what they cannot observe. Without focus, lessons are missed, insights are forgotten, and patterns are repeated. When you take control of your attention, you take control of your direction. You begin to decide how each hour is spent. You think clearly. You act with precision. The mind becomes less reactive and more deliberate. This shift changes the quality of the entire day. Each task becomes more meaningful. Each conversation becomes more present. Each decision becomes more aligned with your deeper goals. When a person holds their mind steady, they shape their life through intention. They are not pulled by every stimulus. They are not driven by noise. They operate from principle. They speak with purpose. They act with stability. This is how the Stoics resisted distraction, not with avoidance, but with structure, not through control of the world, but through control of attention. This is a discipline that can be practiced, one choice at a time, one moment at a time. Chapter 5. The Practice of Presence. Presence is not a vague concept. It is a skill developed through consistent effort. The Stoics treated presence as a necessary part of a stable mind. They believed that being fully engaged in the current moment was the only place where thought could become action. Every decision, every behavior, and every response must be rooted in the present. The past cannot be changed. The future cannot be lived. Only the present can be used. This discipline requires mental training. It means disengaging from fantasy and redirecting awareness to what is physically in front of you. It requires deliberate acceptance of what is real instead of clinging to what is imagined. The Stoics believed that the present is enough. Every moment contains enough material for growth, enough challenges for virtue, and enough clarity for wise action. Presence begins with that realization. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often to confine yourself to the present. He did not try to control the future. He did not dwell on the past. His method was simple. Look at what is in front of you and work with it. This mindset builds a sharp and functional awareness. When you stay present, you stop creating unnecessary problems. You do not imagine pain that hasn't happened. You do not replay mistakes that cannot be reversed. You ground yourself in what can actually be done. Living without presence causes confusion. Hours pass unnoticed. Days are used automatically. Life becomes a series of repeated habits with no reflection. The person drifts without understanding how time was spent or why it felt empty. Without presence, there is no connection to purpose. With presence, each moment becomes a decision. You feel the structure of time. You notice your thoughts. You see what needs to be corrected. You act while fully aware of what you are doing and why. Practicing presence begins with small actions. Do one thing at a time and bring full attention to it. When eating, notice the food. When speaking, listen with care. When reading, avoid scanning. When walking, observe your surroundings. These actions bring the mind into alignment with the body. They make attention a habit. This type of attention trains the mind to resist rushing. It allows you to slow your thoughts enough to catch yourself before reacting without reason. The Stoics believed that a present mind is a prepared mind. A person who is anchored in the present is less shaken by emotion, less distracted by what others say, and more capable of making rational choices. Presence does not remove difficulty, but it reduces confusion. It gives you the chance to respond instead of react. It gives you clarity when others are caught in panic. Presence also helps you see what truly matters. A present person can sense when a conversation requires silence, when a moment requires restraint, or when a decision must be made. This sensitivity is developed by paying attention. It is built by practicing awareness during ordinary tasks. The more frequently you return to the present, the more reliable your mind becomes under pressure. The present is where strength is built. It is where habits are reinforced. It is where reflection can be applied in real time. Each moment gives you the chance to practice courage, patience, justice, or discipline. If your mind is always focused on the past or pulled forward into the unknown, you miss the only opportunity to live with virtue. When you are present, even a difficult day becomes manageable. You no longer judge the day based on comfort. You judge it based on how well you acted within it. You assess whether you stayed focused, whether you spoke honestly, whether you did what needed to be done. This approach builds stability. You no longer need ideal conditions to feel aligned. You only need attention. A present person is not immune to hardship. They feel pain, disappointment, and pressure. But their response is different. They do not drift into regret. They do not collapse under fear. They focus on what is in front of them. They work with it. They think clearly and act firmly. They understand that presence gives them control over their next step, even when the situation is beyond their control. This form of mental discipline is developed gradually. The more you catch your mind drifting, the more often you can bring it back. This repetition becomes training. Each time you return to the present, you weaken the habit of distraction. Each time you act from a place of full attention, you strengthen the mind's ability to hold itself steady. The Stoics practiced presence not as a reaction, but as a standard. They made it a part of daily life. They reflected in the morning to set intention. They reviewed in the evening to reinforce learning. Throughout the day, they returned to the present as a way to stay grounded. This was their way of ensuring that each day was used deliberately. It was their method for living with awareness. Presence is available to anyone. It does not require ideal circumstances. It requires effort, observation, and consistency. You must choose to show up to your own life, moment by moment. When you do, life becomes less chaotic and more stable. You begin to see each moment as a test, as a chance to act rightly. That is how the Stoics lived, and that is how the practice of presence becomes a way of life. Chapter 6. The Discipline of Beginning. The Stoics placed great importance on action. They believed that philosophy must lead to decisions, behavior, and change. Ideas, no matter how wise, held no value if they did not shape how a person lived. Thought without action leads to confusion. Intention without movement creates inattention. The Stoics viewed the power of the individual as being rooted in the capacity to begin, even when conditions are not ideal. The ability to begin reflects control over the will. It shows that a person is not a slave to mood, fear, or doubt. Many people delay their first step. They wait for certainty. They hope to feel ready. They expect a moment when everything becomes easy. That moment rarely appears. The future is unclear. The mind must act in the present to create order. Clarity is a product of action. The Stoics believed that the best way to understand a path is to walk it. You do not gain insight by standing still. Each day offers dozens of opportunities to begin, to speak truthfully, to make a difficult decision, to move the body, to build discipline. The person who understands this does not wait for ideal conditions. They act with what they have. They train themselves to move forward when most people hesitate. This habit builds momentum. It builds structure. The discipline to begin removes indecision. Epictetus reminded his students that philosophy is not measured in discussion, it is measured in behavior. A person who speaks about virtue but avoids discomfort is not practicing philosophy. A person who talks about improvement but delays effort is still stuck. The Stoics believed that action is the final measure. It is the moment when belief is tested. It is the moment when you stop discussing and start becoming. Discipline is developed at the exact point where effort meets resistance. The moment you hesitate is the most important. That is when the choice is made. To act in uncertainty is to practice discipline in its purest form. This builds confidence. It shows that the will can function without complete comfort. It also confirms that values are not dependent on ease. They are expressed when effort is required. Every person has the ability to begin. This power is available in small moments. Getting out of bed when the mind resists. Starting the task without negotiation. Making the call that requires courage. Saying the words that bring clarity. These beginnings are not dramatic. They are steady. They shape identity. The more you begin, the more you become the kind of person who is no longer guided by delay. A disciplined life is not formed through large events. It is shaped through consistent beginnings. The first decision each morning sets the tone for the day. The first response to difficulty shows how you meet adversity. The first act of honesty sets the standard for all your interactions. Each beginning contains the seed of your future pattern. Commitment is not a one-time event. It is a repeated decision. The person who learns to begin again each day becomes resilient. They do not need motivation. They rely on structure. They return to their priorities even when distracted. They continue their path even when progress feels slow. This repetition creates stability. The Stoics trained their minds to begin without delay. They used philosophy as a guide for behavior, not as a theory to admire. They lived by the principle that hesitation weakens direction and beginning confirms it. This approach does not require special talent. It requires a decision to begin now with what is in front of you. That is the first act of strength, and it is always within reach. Chapter 7. The Strength of Endurance. The Stoics did not expect ease. They expected trials. Endurance was a central part of their practice. It was the capacity to move forward without complaint, to stay upright under difficulty, and to remain committed to one's values when pressure increases. Life presents obstacles. The Stoics prepared to meet them by developing inner strength rather than waiting for external conditions to improve. They did not rely on optimism or external reassurance. They trained their minds to withstand disruption. Endurance to the Stoics was not passive suffering. It was the active refusal to abandon reason or character when conditions became unfavorable. It was a deliberate stance, a disciplined posture toward what must be faced. Seneca taught that difficulty is revealing. It exposes the strength or weakness of a person's internal structure. In comfort, most people seem composed, but when challenged, they either fall apart or rise. The Stoic response was to use hardship as proof of training. They did not seek pain, but they saw it as a space where virtue could be practiced. Endurance is developed through acceptance. The person must understand that discomfort is part of the natural process of development. Resistance, friction, and pressure are not signs of failure. They are signs that effort is being tested. The Stoics believed that such conditions allow for application of philosophy. When a person acts with consistency despite hardship, they confirm the strength of their values. The habit of endurance builds capacity. Each difficult day completed without resentment adds to stability. When a person remains committed, even when progress is slow or invisible, their will becomes steady. The act of continuing teaches the mind that effort is not dependent on reward. It becomes normal to keep moving even when things are unclear or heavy. This creates reliability. A person who can endure without collapse becomes someone others can depend on. They do not abandon their post when challenged. They remain anchored. They uphold duties without needing to be watched. They speak with conviction because their words have been tested through experience. Practicing endurance reduces emotional volatility. A mind trained to continue does not get overwhelmed by temporary discomfort. It stays grounded. It measures effort, not emotion. It carries on when enthusiasm fades. This is the discipline of continuing without complaint, of completing the work without being fueled by applause, of doing what is necessary regardless of recognition. The Stoics trained for this by reflecting daily, accepting fate, and reminding themselves that they were built for challenge. They believed that nature equips each person to face what appears. Avoidance was seen as weakness. Repetition was seen as strength. If something difficult happened again and again, it was a chance to respond better. Each moment of endurance shapes a person's identity. The repetition of effort, especially during difficult conditions, carves out strength. When someone persists through loss, through silence, through pressure, they are not only continuing, they are being reshaped. They become more stable, more focused, and more aware of what matters. Endurance does not just keep the body moving, it refines the character. Each time a person chooses to hold steady instead of retreating, they deepen their resilience. That resilience builds a firm foundation for future action. Through repeated endurance, a stable center develops. The person who endures without bitterness learns to move through difficulty with clarity. They no longer react impulsively. They take time to assess, choose, and act. This level of composure does not depend on comfort or agreement from others. It emerges from the strength gained by carrying on without distraction. It becomes visible in the way they speak, with precision and calm. It shows in their choices, which are guided by principle. And it appears in their stillness, the absence of panic or noise. The Stoics saw endurance as a responsibility. They understood that hardship will appear. They did not spend time resisting that truth. They prepared to meet it with discipline. To them, endurance was the proper use of strength. It was the refusal to allow outside events to disrupt internal integrity. A trained soul accepts what must be faced and meets it directly. Endurance does not depend on external validation. It does not appeal to others for sympathy. It begins and ends with action. The person either continues or they stop. The Stoic continues. This kind of endurance requires structure. It must be reinforced daily. The Stoics used reflection, journaling, and reminders of mortality to support it. They trained the will to respond to difficulty with patience, not resistance. When things were at their hardest, they reminded themselves of their purpose. This allowed them to hold firm even when outcomes were uncertain. Endurance was a sign that philosophy had taken root in their behavior. To endure is to choose alignment again and again. It means waking up each day and reaffirming your values through action. It means holding the weight of responsibility without asking for reward. It means accepting that feelings shift, but your actions can remain stable. A person who endures becomes an example, not by declaring strength, but by living it. The Stoic does not expect perfection. They expect commitment. They accept that they will be tested. They focus on responding well. This makes them dependable in crisis, measured in conflict, and calm in uncertainty. They do not change when their environment does. They remain centered. Endurance confirms what words alone cannot. It is how you demonstrate conviction. It is how you show that your values are strong enough to support you. It is how you stay true when pressure invites compromise. This is the strength that does not need display. It shows itself in persistence. The Stoic standard for strength is not dramatic action. It is quiet, steady consistency. It is the refusal to stop acting with integrity even when life becomes difficult. It is the decision to carry on each day without complaint, without delay, and without surrender. This strength is available to anyone willing to practice it. It is earned, and once developed, it becomes part of who you are. Chapter 8. The Power of Restraint. In Stoicism, restraint is a strength. It is not the suppression of natural responses, but the ability to pause and choose. It is the discipline to wait, to remain steady, and to take action only when it agrees with judgment. Restraint is the application of self-control to daily living. It protects the mind from being driven by impulse and teaches the individual to act with purpose. The Stoics understood that freedom depends on internal control. A person who reacts without reflection becomes shaped by circumstances. Their emotions dictate their direction. Their words are triggered by frustration or pride. Their choices reflect the noise around them. The person who can restrain their immediate reaction creates distance between stimulus and response. That distance is where thought can be applied. The ability to restrain begins with awareness. You must observe your initial urge without immediately responding to it. You do not silence the feeling, you examine it. You decide whether action is required, and if it is, you choose the manner and timing with precision. Restraint is not absence, it is measured presence. It is full attention combined with delayed expression. Restraint applies across all areas of life. It begins with speech. When someone speaks with anger or accusation, the disciplined person waits. They do not match emotion with emotion. They listen without becoming defensive. This makes the conversation more productive. It applies to emotion. When fear, envy, or frustration appear, the person who is trained in restraint does not obey the emotion. They feel it, they acknowledge it, but they do not act from it immediately. In consumption, restraint allows for balance. The mind that cannot say enough becomes ruled by desire. The Stoics trained themselves to eat what was needed, not what was craved. They approached appetite as a test of mastery. They saw indulgence without control as a sign of weakness. They believed that pleasure was acceptable when it did not remove the ability to choose. Judgment is another area where restraint is critical. The Stoics warned against quick conclusions. They taught that opinions should follow evidence, not assumption. By restraining judgment, a person gives room for understanding to develop. This prevents conflict caused by misunderstanding. It builds relationships on clarity rather than assumption. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often that power over the self is the most valuable kind of strength. The ability to say no, to hold back, to maintain clarity when pressured, that is real authority. When a person restrains anger, they do not show weakness, they show control. When they avoid unnecessary praise, they stay humble. When they resist the urge to interrupt or dominate a moment, they show confidence in silence. Restraint conserves energy. It prevents wasted motion. It keeps the mind clear. Each act of restraint builds a reserve of strength. That reserve allows the person to stay composed in conflict, to move with calm under pressure, and to maintain balance when others lose it. To practice restraint is to act with intelligence. It is to treat speech, behavior, and thought as tools that must be directed. The Stoic does not waste their effort on proving themselves or reacting to provocation. They focus on what is useful. They measure their tone. They wait until words are needed. They take action only when action aligns with duty. This kind of discipline must be practiced in daily life. Philosophy is not only for moments of crisis. It must be applied during small, often unnoticed decisions. You must observe how you speak when interrupted, how you respond when you are corrected, how you handle moments of boredom, and how you behave when comfort is easy to access. These are the ordinary situations where restraint is trained. These are the repetitions that reinforce clarity. Each act of holding back, each pause before speaking, each decision to wait before reacting, all of these shape the mind toward steadiness. Restraint becomes reliable through repeated testing. The more often you choose to remain composed when provoked, the more natural that response becomes. When this habit strengthens, the mind becomes less reactive. It replaces sudden expression with deliberate control. This is how character is shaped. It is not made during rare dramatic events, but through the consistency of controlled behavior in everyday life. The Stoic seeks to be effective. They do not aim to attract attention. Their focus is on results, not recognition. They understand that strength is displayed through discipline, not through display. Their voice does not rise without cause. Their actions are not driven by pride or insecurity. Their decisions are clear because their thoughts are not pulled in many directions. They conserve their words and avoid exaggeration. They speak when speech serves a purpose. They act when action serves a principle. Restraint is not the refusal to act. It is the choice to act correctly. It is the understanding that timing and tone affect outcome. A restrained person knows that some situations require silence, others require firmness. Some demand patience, others call for immediate precision. This judgment is strengthened by stillness. A mind trained in restraint takes the time to see the full picture before it moves. To practice restraint is to build endurance in the mind. It means giving up the need to prove something in every interaction. It means walking away when the mind wants to win. It means speaking calmly when provoked. It means staying silent when speech would only serve ego. These actions preserve inner peace. They build confidence that does not need praise. They create clarity that is not disturbed by noise. This practice makes the mind a more stable place. It removes confusion. It allows the individual to focus on what is within their control and ignore what is not. The person who practices restraint becomes more consistent in their energy, more precise in their language, and more trustworthy in their actions. People begin to recognize that this individual does not waste words, does not chase attention, and does not respond without thought. The visible result of restraint is composure. A restrained person remains calm when others escalate. They act with purpose in moments of pressure. They listen carefully when others rush to speak. They avoid unnecessary arguments. They stay grounded in what matters. This posture makes them reliable. It gives them influence without seeking it. Others sense that this person has command of themselves, and that command earns respect. Restraint becomes part of character. It does not depend on being watched. It does not collapse under emotion. It holds firm because it has been tested. It has passed the small tests that build structure. This is why the Stoics practiced restraint. They knew that without it, principle breaks under pressure. With it, character holds steady through every test. This is the power of restraint. It allows you to bring reason into every interaction. It protects your integrity when the moment is heated. It conserves your strength for what truly matters. And it ensures that each action you take is guided by thought, not impulse. This discipline, once developed, strengthens every part of life. Chapter 9. The Role of Reflection. Reflection was part of the Stoic rhythm. It was not occasional. It was part of their daily structure. It sharpened the mind. It allowed the individual to step back and see themselves clearly. It exposed weak areas and reinforced strong ones. The act of reviewing the day gave form to thought and direction to conduct. The Stoics practiced evening review with consistency. They asked themselves simple and direct questions. What did I do well? Where did I fail to act as I should? What will I do differently tomorrow? These questions were not abstract. They were grounded in actual events. The purpose was to make progress observable. The exercise was meant to correct, not to punish. Reflection guided the next day's behavior. Without reflection, mistakes are often repeated. Lessons are forgotten. The mind becomes clouded. You begin to act out of habit without evaluating whether that habit is serving you. Decisions become emotional and reactive. Time is spent without awareness. In contrast, with daily reflection, the mind improves its ability to observe its own tendencies. It starts to notice patterns. It starts to anticipate moments of weakness. It becomes a more stable tool for living. Reflection creates deliberate action. You understand why you made certain choices. You begin to trace consequences back to causes. You connect outcomes to effort. This level of awareness helps you make future decisions with greater accuracy. It limits guesswork. It limits regret. When your thoughts are reviewed, they become more useful. When your conduct is examined, it becomes more consistent. The Stoics believed that each day was a unit of growth. The value of the day was measured by how it was used. They tracked action, intention, and attention. They asked whether their behavior reflected their principles. They asked whether their time reflected their priorities. They did not wait for external feedback. They created their own internal system of review. Daily reflection makes progress visible. It removes confusion about what is improving and what needs work. It replaces vague self-judgment with specific observations. You can see whether you followed your structure. You can assess whether you gave in to impulse. You can recall how you handled pressure. These details matter. They shape the future. Reflection also limits emotional buildup. Without it, small mistakes can grow into resentment. Unchecked emotions remain in the background and affect future decisions. By reviewing them at the end of the day, you release tension. You gain perspective. You remind yourself that today is finished, and tomorrow is a new opportunity to apply what you've learned. This practice brings order to the mind. It removes scattered thought. It centers you before sleep. It ends the day with clarity. Even on difficult days, reflection ensures that the day still contributed to your development. It allows you to end the day without avoiding truth. This strengthens honesty and responsibility. The purpose of reflection is not to achieve perfection. It is to remain on the path of continuous correction. The Stoic does not aim to be flawless. They aim to be consistent. Each evening review is a moment of realignment. It brings the day to a close with structure and prepares the mind to begin again with greater focus. When practiced consistently, reflection becomes a reliable guide. It replaces uncertainty with pattern. It gives structure to thought and direction to will. It becomes a daily meeting between your values and your behavior. This meeting is where accountability is formed. This is where Stoicism becomes practical. This is where the disciplined mind is shaped, quietly, steadily, and deliberately. Chapter 10. Living the Philosophy. For the Stoics, philosophy was not theory. It was preparation for life. Its purpose was not debate. It was transformation. A person who studies Stoicism without applying it lives unchanged. A person who applies its principles becomes consistent. The gap between what they say and what they do begins to close. Living the philosophy means acting from reason, keeping your values visible, and using each day to sharpen your character. It means carrying your principles into difficulty, into routine, and into silence. It means doing the right thing without applause. The Stoics believed that life rewards alignment. The rewards are not always external. Often they are inner strength, peace, and self-respect. These are earned through daily practice, not claimed, but demonstrated. To live the philosophy is to carry it quietly and firmly. It is to become the kind of person who does not need reminders to do what is right. The principles have become habits. The habits have become character. And that character, refined daily, becomes the person who does not waste another day.